Have you ever felt so invisible that even God seems far away? Have you ever laid awake at night with an empty stomach, staring into the darkness, wondering if your prayers fade before they reach the sky? There are moments when life becomes so quiet and so heavy that it feels as if the world itself has forgotten your name. But what if the moment you feel most alone is the very moment a test is walking beside you? What if that loneliness is not abandonment, but an invitation? This story begins on a silent road, with a boy who believes he has nothing left to offer, and a choice that will quietly shape his destiny. In a peaceful countryside village, surrounded by wide fields and long dirt roads, lived a boy named Ethan. The village was small, the kind of place where news traveled fast and secrets traveled faster. Yet somehow it failed to notice the quiet suffering of one child. Ethan's home stood at the far edge of the village, where farmland slowly faded into tall grass and emptiness. It was a fragile wooden shack, built from cracked planks and patched with rusted tin. When the wind passed through the fields, the house groaned as if it were tired of standing. When rain fell, water slipped through the roof and darkened the dirt floor. Still, Ethan called it home, because it was all he had left. There was a time when laughter lived in those walls. His father had worked the fields with strong, worn hands. His mother had filled the evenings with gentle humming while she cooked, and soft prayers whispered before sleep. Then sickness arrived without warning, quiet and cruel. First his father, then his mother. The funerals were short, carried out with simple words that disappeared into the wind. Life moved forward for everyone else. Ethan stayed behind. At an age when other children were guided and protected, he learned to survive on his own. He worked wherever someone would allow him, carrying water until his arms burned, chopping wood until his palms split, helping farmers during harvest until his legs shook from exhaustion. Some days he earned a few small coins. Other days only a thin bowl of soup handed to him without a name. Hunger slowly stopped feeling like an emergency and became a habit. Loneliness stopped hurting and became familiar. Silence grew so loud that it followed him even in his sleep. But his mother had left him something deeper than food or shelter. During the hardest days, when meals were small and worry filled the room, she would break their bread in half and say that when you have little, give a little. She told him not to let hardship turn his heart cold. She said generosity keeps the heart alive, and that even the smallest gift, when given with love, is never wasted. Those words stayed with him like warmth hidden in his chest. When hunger twisted his stomach, he heard her voice. When bitterness tried to take root, he remembered her smile. And so Ethan walked through his days, carrying more than emptiness. He carried a lesson, a fragile light in a world that had given him many reasons to grow dark. He did not know it yet, but that quiet lesson was about to be tested on a lonely path, far from the village, where no one was watching, and where one simple choice would speak louder than any prayer. One evening, after a long day of labor beneath a merciless sun, Ethan began the slow walk home with a small cloth sack tucked under his arm. Inside were a few pieces of bread and a little rice, just enough for one simple meal. His hands ached from work. His legs felt heavy, each step pulling against the ground. Yet there was a quiet relief in his chest, because tonight he would eat. It was a small comfort, but to him it felt like safety. He chose the river path, even though it was longer than the road through the fields. The tall trees offered shade, and the steady sound of water softened the noise in his mind. The air was cooler there, carrying the smell of wet soil and leaves. As he walked, he whispered a prayer, not for riches or an easier life, but for strength. Strength to remain gentle in a world that often rewarded cruelty. Strength to stay kind when kindness seemed like a luxury he could no longer afford. Halfway along the path, he noticed a figure ahead. An old man sat on a flat stone near the water, leaning heavily on a wooden staff. Dust covered his clothes. His shoulders curved inward, as if the road itself had pressed him down. His face carried the deep lines of long travel and longer years. When Ethan passed, the man slowly lifted his head. "Young man," the stranger said in a tired voice, "I have not eaten today. I have walked far, and my legs are failing me. If you have even a small bite to spare, I would be grateful." Ethan stopped. His fingers tightened around the cloth sack. That food was his dinner. Without it, he would go to sleep hungry again, listening to his stomach argue with the dark. The simplest choice would be to apologize and continue walking. No one would judge him. No one would even know. Hunger had already taken so much from him. Did it have to take this too? Inside his chest, another voice stirred. Soft, familiar, steady. When you have little, give a little. He stood there in silence, feeling the quiet battle rise between survival and compassion. The river moved beside them, patient and indifferent, as if waiting to see which voice he would obey. Slowly, almost as if his body chose before his fear could speak, Ethan knelt. He opened the sack and took out the best piece of bread. He brushed away the dust with his sleeve, careful not to waste a crumb. Then he held it out with both hands. "Please," he said quietly, "eat first." The old man accepted it with trembling fingers. He ate slowly, respectfully, as if every bite carried more meaning than hunger alone. Ethan sat beside him, offering water from the river, steadying him when his knees weakened. They spoke while the light faded through the trees. The old man asked about his life. Ethan told him about his parents, about the small house at the edge of the village, about working each day just to survive, about the fear of becoming bitter in a world that seemed endlessly unfair. The words came easily, as if his heart had been waiting for someone who would listen. The stranger listened without interrupting. His eyes were calm and thoughtful, holding no pity, only attention. When the old man was strong enough to stand, he placed a gentle hand on Ethan's shoulder. "You have a good heart," he said. "Do not let this world make it small." Then he turned and walked slowly down the path, disappearing between the trees, leaving Ethan alone with the sound of the river and a sack that now felt much lighter. Ethan finished the small portion that remained and returned home under a sky deep with stars. He lay down that night, still hungry, but his chest felt strangely full. Peace settled over him, quiet and unexpected, as if his mother's words had wrapped around him once more. He did not know that dawn would bring sounds the village had never heard before, or that the stranger he had fed beside the river would soon step back into his life wearing a different face. And he did not know that his quiet choice, made in a place no one could see, had already begun to move the future toward him at dawn. The village awoke to sounds that did not belong to its quiet streets. Horse hooves struck stone. Voices murmured with urgency. The church bell rang without warning, sharp and unfamiliar in the morning air. Ethan stepped outside his small house, still tired from the night before, and froze where he stood. In the village square rested a grand carriage, polished like a mirror, guarded by men whose posture spoke of discipline and authority. Villagers gathered in uneasy clusters, whispering as if afraid to disturb the moment. A man dressed in fine clothing stepped forward, raising his staff. "By order of His Majesty the King," he called, "a child named Ethan is requested. Come forward." Fear rushed through Ethan's chest like cold water. He looked around as if the name might belong to someone else, but every face had already turned toward him. Slowly, uncertainly, he walked through the crowd. The carriage door opened. The old man from the river stepped out. But he was no longer bent with fatigue. His clothes were no longer covered in dust. He wore robes trimmed with gold, and a simple crown rested upon his head. The weariness was gone from his face, replaced by quiet strength. "You offered bread when you had almost nothing," the king said gently. "I travel in disguise to learn the true hearts of my people. Kindness given without hope of reward is rarer than treasure." The square fell silent. "I have no child to inherit my duties." The king continued, "I seek not wealth, but character. You will come with me. You will learn, and what you receive, you will one day give forward in a single moment." The life Ethan had known slipped behind him like a shadow at sunset. Years passed like slow pages turning. Ethan studied, trained, and learned the weight of leadership. But more than that, he learned to listen. He spoke with workers, walked among farmers, protected the forgotten, and remembered hunger each time decisions were placed in his hands. He wore fine clothes, lived in wide halls, and sat at tables full of food. Yet he never forgot the boy who once counted crumbs in a cloth sack, never forgot the lonely path beside the river. He never forgot the bread that cost him his dinner, and he never forgot that God had not answered him with thunder or fire, but with a quiet test disguised as a tired old man. God often speaks in moments, not miracles, in encounters, not announcements, in choices made when no one is watching. So if you feel unseen today, remember this: what you do in quiet places matters. What you choose when there is no reward in sight still echoes. Sometimes the one asking for help is part of your test, and sometimes that test is the doorway to a future you never imagined. If you are walking a lonely path, keep your heart open. You may be closer than you think to the moment that changes everything.